Madeline.
Hello.
So we're saying hi to Val, who isn't here this evening, but she sent such a wonderful email, and so I wanted to make triple sure that we record. And I think Isidore should be on his way, and hopefully Susan too. I'm so glad to see everybody. Let's dive in. So I think what we'll do tonight, and everyone's gotten I'll resend each bit each week. So
It's really
have to go
nice.
back and retrieve other stuff. So we'll just accumulate as we go. But what I'd like to do tonight is meet the remaining trope groups that are in the opening blessing,
Okay.
just so that we have filled in that blessing and we can more or less name the trope that are in the opening blessing. So, which will take us only slightly off of the order that they are on the PowerPoint. So let me pull that up. Or I won't. There it is. And voila. Okay. So I was going to start there, but I'm not going to. Let's go to our trope list. Okay. So let's just begin by a little warm up, a little vocal warm up. And I don't like the way that looks. Let me just a little bigger. There we go. Okay. So for our main trope, which we've met the big three, as I call them, let's just sing together the full versions of the Et Nachta phrase. We're getting its name from the last trope in the group, the Sof Pasuk, and the Katon. So you don't have to sing at all first. You can listen if you like, or you can be muted and sing along, or however you like. So to warm up, let's do Mercha Tipah Munach Et Nachta. Let's do each one 3 times. Let me get a bouncing ball too. Here we go. Mercha Tipcha Munach Et Nachta. And again. Mercha Tipcha Munach Et Nachta. As we know, there are going to be variations on it, but almost exclusively will follow in this order, more or less. Going right to left. And there may be pieces that are missing, but they're not going to suddenly be wildly out of order. One more time, do that on purpose, see if we can pull our melody back out, and let's sing together. Mercha Tipcha Munach Et Nachta. Hi, Susan. And the Sof Pasuk phrase, which begins the same, but in a full version with all 4, has a different kind of mercha. But listen to it once. Mercha Tipcha. So far the same. Mercha Sof Pasuk. Mercha Tipcha. Mercha Sof Pasuk. And some people, this mercha, this one here floating out there, is almost, I don't mean to disrespect it, but it's almost a throwaway melody. It has very little personality unto itself. Unlike Et Nachta or Sof Pasuk or Tipcha. Tipcha is nice and strong and will always sound the same. The merchas are going to float a little bit. They're kind of weak. And the munach, which will change its melody, remember, depending on what comes after it. I wish I had an answer as to why, but that's just the way it got handed down. It's a good test. So we have munach et nachta. And when we get to our katon, we're going to hear a different munach. Let's do sof pasuk phrase, the whole big sof pasuk phrase, a couple times. Mercha tipcha, mercha sof pasuk. You might hear mercha sof pasuk or mercha sof pasuk. This mercha is just weak. So not to worry too much about replicating it spot on with the notes. We'll get close for a while until you feel comfortable just doing it how you like. 2 more times. Sorry, I lied. We'll do it 2 more times. Mercha tipcha, mercha sof pasuk. And last time. Mercha tipcha, mercha sof pasuk. Before we review katon, let's do each of these one more time. The et nachta phrase and the sof pasuk phrase. Mercha tipcha, munach et nachta. Mercha tipcha, mercha sof pasuk. And here comes Isadora, so let's all, for good measure, let's do these one more time. Hi, Isadora. We're just practicing the first 2 phrases, and then we're going to go on. Last time, dear ones. Mercha tipcha, munach et nachta. Mercha tipcha, mercha sof pasuk. Last week, we met the katon phrase. Its fancy name is zakef katon. And to remind, it goes like this. Kadma mapach pashta munach katon. Hear it a couple times. Kadma mapach pashta munach katon. And again, kadma mapach, which is always followed by pashta munach katon. Now, my friends, you might notice that thus far, all of these shapes are their own shape. They really don't look like much else that we would know. They kind of stand alone until we get here to this katon. This katon trope does in fact look like the shva vowel, does it not? If we had, say, a nice lamed and a shva vowel under it, that would make the sound of the lamed, right? L, L, or take a bet. Oops. Ah, goodness. That's no good. Let's try it again. If we had a nice bet, and I had 2 dots under it, that would be B, B. But let's imagine that I have that one away, and I add a yud. Let's take this away as well. Now I have the word libi, libi, my heart. Now what happens if I have 2 dots over the bet? Now that's a trope mark. So I would sing this libi, katon, libi. Now, it's not going to suddenly be that a vowel that is always under the word or under a letter will be suddenly over the letter, but it's something to get used to. If you're learning trope symbols with us now, this guy does look like a vowel, but he's a trope. Most of them don't look like vowels, but that one is a little pesky. There's one other that's going to potentially trip us up, but it also shows up above the words as opposed to under, where it would be if it was a vowel. So I'm sorry for that, but it is what it is. Couple of other things to remind: the kadma will generally go over the last syllable. And if it comes before a noticeable mapach, it's for sure a kadma. Once you have this mapach, I've never seen a mapach that wasn't followed by a pashta. So that's another clue. Though pashta and kadma look exactly alike in older printings, but the pashta will go over the last letter of the word. So I'm going right to left. And then we have this munach, which is the munach before katon, as opposed to munach before etnach. Now, in the world of Haftarah trope, really all the trope, this munach before the katon is a very distinct melody, right? If you're used to hearing Haftarahs at all, da 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 da, it's lovely, and it has a very descriptive, distinct sound. So this munach before the katon is going to be like a signature melody. Very different than munach and alta, which is, it's not melodically very interesting. So those two are quite different. More or less okay so far? No one's run screaming from the room? Okay. Let's do the big katon phrase 2 more times. Kadma mapach pashta munach katon. And one more time. Kadma mapach pashta munach katon. Let's let that stay for right now. Erase my board here. And I'm going to take us past the trope at the bottom of this page. Not to worry, we will visit it. Number 4 is also a katon because it is named, as they all are, after the last trope in the group. So this is also a katon phrase. It is slightly different and quite rare. So I'm going to skip it for right now, but not to worry, it is on the curriculum. And instead, let's go to the 2 remaining trope that you are going to need for your opening blessing. And those are here. That is number 6 and number 7. Now, of number 6, there's some vagaries and debate as to how actually these 2 here are sung. The one that's called Azla and the one that's called Geresh. For right now, bear with me, we are just going to focus on the Kadma and Azla. Kadma is the same Kadma that we had up above. Kadma before Mapach, so it is the same Kadma. Kadma, when it goes with this guy here, and there, again, there's debate on how to sing it and the placement. So for the moment, I'm going to do something very naughty and just cross this out for right now. So don't look over there for right now. Let's just look here. Much, 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 much more common. And some people sing them exactly the same, and not to worry. For right now, just learn kadma, which you already know, ve'azla. And you all know that from some version of Haftarah, right? Baruch atah. That should sound familiar. I hope it does. Or some version thereof. It's pretty standard kind of conservative movement melody for the Haftarah blessings. So that's kadma ve'azla. We have a little clue in the name that these guys have to go together, which is that this is ve, meaning and. So when it's kadma and azla, they make a nice couple. So thus far, this is the shortest of the trope families that we've met. It's only 2. So they're a happy pair, although sometimes the kadma gets around. But the vast majority of the time, when these come together, just sing it as kadma ve'azla. Can everyone try that? Let's do it 3 times. Kadma ve'azla. 2 more times. Kadma ve'azla. And again. Kadma ve'azla. And one more time. Kadma ve'azla. And you know it from Baruch atah. We'll go to that slide in a minute, but let's just try it with the Baruch atah. Baruch atah. Should be familiar. Now, if you're comfortable with Haftarah presented in a group, you know that what comes next is Adonai. That should probably sound familiar. And that's this trope here, the Revi'i. Now, Revi'i, oh gosh, fun times. Okay, so Revi'i is a strong trope and can stand on its own, and it does all the time. It's another one of the few where we can kind of guess why it's named the way it's named. Revi'i means something to do with 4. And the design they made for it is this nice 4-sided diamond. And in Torah trope, it has specifically 4 notes coming down. I won't sing it so we don't get confused, but that maybe is partly why it has its name. But this is a Revi'i phrase, and oh no, look at this mess. Okay, so to know, you don't get that many full Revi'i phrases, but a full one goes like this. Do a little bit of drawing a little. Munach, Munach, Revi'i. That's a full Revi'i phrase in Haftarah trope. Munach, Munach, Revi'i. I always think of this one a little like a vault in gymnastics. Not that in a million years I could have ever done that, though I tried. But kind of like the revving up. Da, 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 like somebody runs up to the vault and then jumps. Da, 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 and then comes down and sticks the landing. Da, 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 da. It's a lot of notes. I know. If you like to sing, you'll love a full Revi'i. If not as much, approximate it. That's okay. So, but the problem is, oh no, first of all, there's a number of problems here, right? Well, we introduced 2 different munachs, or 2 more munachs. This munach before this crazy guy here, which we're going to think of like a music rest. It's called a pasik. put a little exclamation or a little mark there. It's called a pasik. It has no sound at all. It is silent. And it's from the word pasuk or hafsaka. Pasuk really means like a pause. So it's like a music rest that very few people observe. But once in a while, it can add drama to the reading. It separates these two munachs when you do get a full one. And yes, it is a vertical mark, but it won't be below the word the way the sof pasuk is, or the little line that isn't a trope, but is just an accent mark. So it has a function. Usually its function is primarily to divide up the two munachs that sometimes precede the revi'i in the full revi'i phrase. Munach even has a fancy name, munach legarnei. It sounds French to me. And it's the one that comes before this pasik and divides, and these are divided by that little line there. Now, again, it's rare, but, and sometimes this pasik, a vertical line, it kind of shows up in the middle of things. A very careful or super dramatic Torah reader or Haftarah reader might use that pasik, that little rest, again, for dramatic effect, but it's rarely done. For a cool side note, I can't pull one off the top of my head in Haftarah, but in the in Genesis, where Mother Sarah is called out for laughing at God, when she tries to answer God, this pasik shows up. It's like it was in between her words. It's kind of like she's stuttering or stumbling over her words. It doesn't really comport with the trope per se, but they sometimes will drop in some pasiks. And other times it's not so easy to figure out why it's for dramatic effect or not. So when they come, don't sing them. Trope-wise, when it's between the two munachs before revi'i, that indicates that these munachs are to be sung quite differently. Now, I'm sorry about revi'i. But it kind of takes us to the intermediate level, particularly with the two new munachs. So fancy munach, let's just sing that a couple times. Munach, run up to the vault. Munach, and try it again. Munach. Now, when you have a full version, this munach, I was taught to sing it. Munach revi'i. Really quite lovely. Munach revi'i. And it has that little hiccup at the end. So listen to the full revi'i phrase a couple of times. Munach. Munach revi'i. Munach. Munach revi'i. Again. Munach. Munach revi'i. Now the bummer of it, although it's supposed to make things a little easier, is that when you have just munach revi'i, which is pretty common, when you have just these two guys here, so munach, put it out there just for clean. You have that a lot, as opposed to the full one with the pasik in there. So when you have munach revi'i all by itself, I was taught to sing it simple. Munach Revi'i. Now, some people might want to be fancy and just do the Munach Revi'i. That's fine, but I was given permission by the best of the best to just do it simple. Munach Revi'i. And I understand that some of you may be taking the plunge and maybe chanting a little Haftarah very soon, maybe on Parshat Tetzaveh, my brother's bar mitzvah portion. And wouldn't you know it, Tetzaveh begins with Munach Revi'i. That's the first trope in that Haftarah. I'm working with Mira to make sure that people who want to do that have some recordings. I do recommend, I'll say it publicly, whoever takes that first section, it should not be the first time that they're chanting Haftarah, would be my recommendation. Is it that the first section happens to be quite sophisticated. But I use the rarest tropes, just bad luck. But it does
Can I
begin.
ask a question?
Sure, Patty.
So the choice to either do Munach fancy or not, might that be based on dramatic effect? Like, let's save, like if there's a big one coming up, let's save it for the next one, the Revi'i.
Absolutely. It's chanter's choice, because the crux really of this particular trope is the Revi'i. Everything else is just a build up to Revi'i. This is almost what comes before it is almost incidental. Again, if it's a word maybe that you notice and you want to accent it, go for it. You can start Munach. But the point, the strong part of the trope is the Revi'i. So however you build up to it. On the recording, Mira, just so you know, I did the simple version. Munach, there was enough. So it happens to start that way. So, but the full Revi'i group, it's really, Revi'i itself, very common. The full one, not so much, not so much. And this one can be subject to a little bit of strangeness and changing up stuff. There are a couple of trope that, like I say nicely, get around. So sometimes we find a strange trope like attached to another one. It's like it's, trying out something different. But again, for quite a while, nobody would have something that wasn't already recorded by, a cantor or a friend or a teacher or somebody. You don't have to guess for quite a while. And ultimately, by the time you're all generating your own reading of these texts, you just chanter's choice. Woohoo! Thanks, Susan. Okay. All right. So that's our big Revi'i group. And our Kadma ve'azla. Do we remember the melody? Let's try Kadma ve'azla again. See if I do. Okay. So let's try this one here. Whoa. Okay. Kadma ve'azla. But again. Kadma ve'azla. And again. Kadma ve'azla. And just so you know, it is very commonly in Torah and Haftarah followed directly by Revi'i. Almost as if the cantilators knew that what went up needed to come down. So Kadma goes quite up and it's got to come sort of gently down. So a very common sequence is Kadma ve'azla Revi'i. And it's nice melodically because ve'azla is on the same note as Revi'i. So it kind of falls nicely out of it. Might not have that, but that's very common. That these two families, they're like good neighbors. They go together a lot, the things. But again, the full Revi'i phrase, Munach, Munach. Oh, I didn't pause. I should. Munach, Basik, Munach, revi'i. Again, munach, pesik, munach, revi'i. Or if you like, and they're just these two guys together, perfectly fine to just do munach revi'i, because that's where our attention's going anyway. Up to you. So those are the two that are for this week. It's nice and plenty to get used to, particularly the strange munachs. And let's take a look now at how they work in the blessing. So that we will feel, oops, nice and happy with that. Okay. Just to remind, very annoying, absolutely essential thing to know. Munach changes. I need to add melody in there. Munach changes its melody depending on what comes after it. Don't worry too much about that here. We will come back to this. We mentioned the double trope last week, but we'll get there. Munach changes melody depending on what comes after it. Just ran out of symbols. Okay. The double trope or the trope that look like each other, we'll meet those more as well. We already met the kadma and the pashta. And that's plenty for this moment. Okay. So let's pretend that we don't know too much about these tropes yet. So for review, and this is what I would have people do this, if we were together, we would have a handout that we would work on. Right, Madeline? I missed that, but at least here you don't have to worry about parking. Okay, and we would circle the trope. We would go along and we would circle trope. And this annoyance here, because so here's a good example of that little trope. It looks like looks like a schwa vowel, right? Looks like a schwa. This is not a trope. No, that's not a good example because it's under Adonai. Forgive me, but it's not a schwa. It's a trope. It's a katon. So we just get used to it being above the word. Now, every trope that I've circled up until this point is not an ending trope. There are only 14 ultimately, and one of them is my katon. Ah, an ending trope, finally. Boy, it took me to the end of the line. That's all right. So that's my first phrase. Then I would go on. So, okay, let's see what else. Is this an ending trope? No, it's a mapach. Oh, look, followed by pashta. How nice of it. Munach. Ah, here's another one. Katon. Katon is an ending phrase, is it not? An ending symbol. So there we go. That is my next phrase. All I'm doing is circling trope right now. So I want to see, what is this puppy made of? What is this little text made of? Okay, so far so good. Only two phrases so far. Mercha, tipcha, here comes the munach, and an et nachta. Is an et nachta an ending trope? Yes, it is. So that's my next phrase. That's the end of my next phrase. Aha! Look what we now know. Ta-da! Kadma ve'azla. Ah. Is that an ending trope? Well, it is. So it's only two words. That's a nice full family. And look how nicely predictable. It was followed by revi'i. Now, that's its own family. It's not part of the kadma ve'azla. It's its own phrase. So far, so I'm just looking for ending tropes. Mapach, ashtam. Nope, not yet. Munach. Ah, katon. There's one. end the phrase, ta-da. Okay, going on. Sorry, let's just do trope. Munach katon. Doesn't matter that I only had 2 out of the big katon phrase. That's an ending trope. And I've got only my last little bit to go. Mercha, tipcha, sof pasuk. Aha! That's my chunk of text. Okay. So how many phrases? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 phrases total. I have 8 phrases total. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 katon phrases. 1, 2, 3, 4 of varying lengths. I have 1 etnach phrase, a sof pasuk, a kadma and azla, and a revi'i. There's one more family that, God willing, we'll meet next week that with these 5 families makes up, in my unscientific estimation, 92% of all trope. Maybe 91%, I don't know. But it's more than 90. And then the remainder are the slightly rare and very rare trope. Well, medium rare, super rare, and really well done. There are a very few that are almost unheard of. Some that are quite unusual, and then the medium rare ones. And we'll meet those. But with these and one more, you've got more than 90% of the melodies that you're going to need. So let's look at this. Now we've got our whole opening blessing. So I if you're familiar with this, I know it can feel a little tedious, but it's worth it to really embody the skill. So let's do this. I'll get a better arrow. Okay. So we've got kadma, nicely situated over the last syllable. Kadma, and before mapach, pashta. I have a second pashta. This is unusual, but it happens. And now I also have 2 in the one word. That's to remind, to review. Pashta must go over the last letter of the word. We don't know why. There are a few like that, where they have to go in a particular place. Most of them not. Pashta must go over the last letter, but if the last letter is not the accent, they will give us a second one where the accent actually is. But they won't take away the one that goes over the last letter, because that's where pashta goes. So the second one is really the, quote, secondary one, but it's the indicator of where the accent is. So this is Eloheinu, not Eloheinu. If it were, they would only put 1. So they're helping us. They're trying to help. So we've got kad ma pach pashta, a second pashta, munach katon. And the trope is very nicely placed exactly how we should accent the words. Baruch atah Adonai, even though the letters don't obviously spell Adonai, we just read them as that. But here it is over the last letter, and that's where the accent goes anyway. Adonai, Eloheinu, Melech Ha'olam. So the trope are not just randomly dropped on the word, they're placed so helpfully exactly where the word is supposed to be accented. So it's Melech Ha'olam. Munach katon. And you have to drag out and cut off a little bit. That's going to take a little while to get used to, because it's munach melech and then katon, but we have to sing it ka'aton ha'olam. So you'll use your recording until you get used to kind of being okay with it on your own. But the trope is placed so nicely, and going on in the next bit, exactly the same. Mapach pashta munach katon. So mapach asher katon bachar munach binvi'im katon tovim. So sometimes it's cleaner than others. When it's not as clean, we work it out together till you get used to it. So asher bachar binvi'im tovim mercha tipcha munach et nachta veratza. So mercha, it's like me'ercha veratza tipcha. Vedivrehem, that's long. Ti'ipcha vedivrehem. And I know to do that because there's a tipcha sitting nicely under hem. Didn't show up until then, so I've got to stretch out my trope. Vedivrehem munach hane'emarim mu'unach. Well, actually more. Mu'unach hane'emarim et nachta. Nice. Be'emet. It's cleaner there. And then our new guys. Kadma ve'azla. Baruch atah. Let's do that again. Baruch atah. And then our Revi'i Adonai. And back to Mapach Pashta Munach Katon Habocher Batorah Uv'Moshe Avdo. This is a nice juxtaposition of the shva vowel and the katon trope. Right next to each other there. So just, and even here in this printing, the katon is printed a little fatter. In some of the fonts, some printings you'll see that to be helpful, but some of the really old printings, no. You'll just had to know which was which. Avdo katon, and just munach katon, u'Yisrael amo. And then we finish with a lovely mercha ti'ipcha sof pasuk. And I know it's a sof pasuk and not just an accent mark like in other places, because it came with, here I made a big fat colon, but a nice ending. There it's really punctuation. A little line and the colon. So mercha, but it's stretched out again. Me'ercha uvin vi'e ti'ipcha ha'emet sof pasuk v'tzedek. It's exactly 8:15, but let's do together, if we feel confident, if not, just listen. Let's do the whole opening blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar binvi'im tovim veratza vedivrehem hane'emarim be'emet Baruch atah Adonai habocher batorah uv'Moshe avdo uv'Yisrael amo uv'invi'ei ha'emet v'tzedek. And then you are absolutely in the melody. We've forgotten what Torah melody sounds like, so they don't get confused, because that was already minutes and minutes ago in the service. And you are all set to go into your Haftarah reading, whichever it is. We don't want any of that, but and that's from Mishpatim, as we'll look starting together next week. Actually, we'll start looking at an actual text and hunting for trope. We'll go trope hunting. Exciting. But you'll see, you already can take a big chunk of scary looking text and at least start to break it down into some of its little bitty parts.
Can you send that to us in the meantime?
Oh, the
So we can
Mishpatim?
start looking at it?
Oh, sure. It's on the PowerPoint attachment that
Okay.
in last week's, but I'll take a screen share of it and just put it in the body of the email. How's that?
Okay.
That be helpful? Okay. Fun with it.
Thank you.
At the beginning of that one, though, there are a bunch of ones that are the well done trope, or the very rare ones. So you can just do a quick eye for ones that you do recognize, and don't worry about the ones that you don't.
Yeah, be great.